After 5 months of dealing with stuff in the world outside, finally, it shall be heard far and wide that I declare the case of the 55 Terminators given into my care as officially rescued! Greetings, ladies and laddies, and welcome back to our massive Dark Angel eBay rescue. 50 Terminators in, we've finally reached the 5 HQ models at last, consisting of 1 devout banner carrier, 1 very old Terminator captain, 1 Chaplain made from tin as well, 1 guy that looks like an Iron Hand, so I'ma treat him like a tech marine, and 1 more Terminator Sergeant. These miniatures are supposed to be the pinnacle of the strike force, the true creme de la crop, so I decided to take my sweet time and give them their own standalone video, rattling them off one after the other to give them the attention they deserve and our Emperor the glory he is owed. So, prepare your incense and reiterate your oaths, as we'll get going with the first of the bunch, the Devout Standard Bearer. This regular Terminator is a nice piece of casual kit bashing, boasting the banner of a Grey Knight's HQ force on its back, as well as what looks to be a fantasy spellbook, and this weird weapon? Which origin might remain a mystery to us forever. As we did before in the first part of this rescue, 5 months ago, we're gonna make use of some dry brushing to take care of their armor, which is the quickest but also the messiest part on our list. Once that is out of the way, we can swing our brushes a little more delicately, bringing out the details of this miniature once more. I mean, not that it gets old. Trying to give clogged areas like these some definition again without removing the previous paint is what it's all about after all. Could you imagine calling this a rescue if I just removed the old paint and painted it from scratch? Ha! Ridiculous! The right pattern of this standard bearer is clearly not a standard issue, so I decided to paint it in the green of the Dark Angels with an orange brass trim. Maybe it too is a relic of the dark age of technology or the time of the Crusades, who knows. One of the things that desperately needs a touch-up is the book this marine is holding. After cleaning the pages with a dark khaki, we take our dry brush once more to go in with a sandy beige, and then a really light khaki around the edges. With this, the pages get a nice gritty texture, looking like the age-old paper it's supposed to be. Speaking of cleanup, for such a proud chapter, they surely did let their standards drop. I mean, literally, apparently. Obviously, we can't have a banner that dirty, which is why we take out some medium grey on a big brush to give ourselves a clean canvas to work with. Then we start giving it some proper highlighting, first with a light grey for the broader areas, and then a bright white for the more prominent folds. This was actually quite difficult with such a flat area, so I leaned a bit more towards the randomness in the end. Now, with such lovely sculpting in the front, we really should go all in on the detailing. For example, I'd like to have a small lava effect in between these cracked stones. So we take a bright red to fill in all the crevices, and then follow it up with a bright orange to pick out all the areas where multiple lines intersect. Lastly, we take a bright yellow for the hotspots, after which it is time to repaint the foul demon slayed atop this hill. Here I changed the former red skin to have more of a purple tone, picking out all of the muscles and other details with a light pink on a very fine brush. I love how the previous owner already painted the Grey Knight in the Dark Angel's color scheme. I only darkened it down a little more, picking out the parts that he left silver as I did so. For the highlights on the armor, we can take some olive green with a bright green for the direct reflexes. After that, it's time for some cool glow effects. For example, on the halo, and especially important, on his sword. Stuff like this really sells the effect of this banner, which definitely had one of the biggest glow up in this entire rescue. The book he's carrying also got a huge makeover, from the Latin word ire, which roughly means of fury, to a portrait of our Lord and Savior, the God Emperor of Man himself. The first freehand in this video. I of course also tried to emulate this look for the book on the banner as well, to tie everything nicely together. Spreading the faith with flags and words is good, but sometimes you need a little more force to convince the doubtful of the righteous path. Which is where a chaplain comes in. Much as the rest of these guys, the chaplain is just a little rough around the edges, with a color scheme a little too simple for my taste. And some grass in his exhaust grills. He is like many of us, content, but not even close to his full potential. Let's get him where he needs to be. For the armor, I mixed some pure black with a dark blue. Remember, a little bit of blue goes a long way to make your black and white look a lot richer. To help this dark model really stand out, especially considering its look in a tabletop battle, we take a bright white on our brush next and paint all over the adornments that for now have been painted with silver. Remember how I said that blue helps white? After the black shading, I took a tiny bit of blue contrast and mixed it into the still wet wash. I definitely think that we made the right call here. The rest of this guy is only really a task of cleaning up, and although there are still a few things that I would have liked to go into further detail, like the writing on his parchment or the eyes of his helmet, I'm also realizing that this video will take forever if I won't start focusing on only the most important parts of the individual rescue operations. Which is quite absurd if you think about why I even wanted to make this video as its separate entity, but this is just how it goes, I guess. And with the souls of this universe having someone to turn to, it is time we talk about someone who can salvage the spirits of the machine. Now, I'm pretty sure that this guy was never meant to be a tech marine, but the helmet he had on reminded me so much of an Iron Hand that I just decided for him to be perfectly suited for this job. After his armor was all cleaned up in the bone white color of the Deathwing, I took a pale red and painted the left arm with his power fist, as well as the left leg with it. This will show his devotion to the Omnissiah, but still leave more than enough room for there to be no questions as to where his core loyalties lie, which I think is very much lore accurate. The rest of his details went fairly similar to his original look and what we did with the other Marines, except for the thing covering his crotch. I believe this is supposed to be a big piece of parchment, but hence the previous owner wanted it silver, I thought I'd honor his idea and convert it into a chainmail, with first a bunch of silver and then a bunch of dark grey dots to make the rings. I kinda ran out of patience at this point, okay? As I was finishing him up, I also decided to give his hammer orange energy lines, to further hammer home his affiliation to the Forge Worlds. This is also a great time to show off just how insanely clogged with paint some of these miniatures were. I don't think I could achieve something like this even if I tried. But as Master Yoda said, there is no try. As we make our way to the fourth of the troop, the old Terminator Captain. Would you believe me if I said that this guy was actually quite difficult for me to approach in a rescue? It's true, because looking back at what we've already come across, this is by far the best painted model of this army. Sure, he has some of the same problems that the others have, but he also has a level of detail and passion put into his paint job that he almost feels kind of out of place amongst these other Marines. In terms of the rescue, I did two things to really hone in a new era for these guys. First, the shield. Speaking of being out of place, this shield deserved some special attention, as it for sure would have been a powerful artifact to behold, and also not the first instance of a loyalist Marine picking up a chaotic item for himself. I tried to reflect on that by painting some weird shapes of the fiery warp and some demonic faces of the entities that hide within it onto the front plate of the shield. After that, I decided that the 8-pointed star should glow in a fiery blaze of unholy energy. So I first shaded the outline with a Bordeaux red, and then started with a bright orange on the star itself. From there I worked myself up, all the way to a pure white, each color covering less and less of the sculpt, to create the illusion of a hot glimmer in the middle. The second thing I did was completely freehanding an awesome motif for the banner he had mounted on his carapace. This would be the most glaring difference between the before and after of the model, as I poured some real time and effort into this picture. Having the reference for it on my phone next to me, I took the smallest brush I had in my arsenal and started painting. The whole process was a back and forth of different ideas and misplaced brush strokes, which had to be quickly corrected. And as nerve-wracking as it was, to me a solid freehand is one of the core traits of a masterful paint job. So I really relish moments like these, where I get to test the current boundaries of my abilities. And when it was done, I felt proud as a peacock. And speaking about testing one's abilities, let's get to the very last Marine of this rescue, the Terminator Sergeant. The reason I saved this guy up for last is because in the very beginning of this project, I declared that I would try to reach the quality of this paint job you see right here. It's from another Marine that I also found on eBay that day I found this army, and seeing that these are the very same model, what better way to check if I reached my goal. Of course, took special care that the color scheme would match up as closely as possible, and also used some techniques that I've never tried before. For example, painting the tabard with a dark black first, before applying the green tones themselves, using the brightest green only in sparsely selected areas. Not a perfect result, but I quite like the contrast, so we gotta keep experimenting with that one in the future. Much of the other stuff was nothing too different from what we already did, and again, respecting everyone's time, I don't want to explain that too much. However, there's one thing that I do want to cover, and that is the sword. To get the effect we're looking for, we first start by just roughly blocking in our 3 main blue colors, both sides of the blade wrongly mirroring one another, if that is a good explanation. After we paint the tip of our blade in our brightest white, it's time for a lot of neat wet blending, taking a fine brush and the colors from before to smooth out all of the transitions between the paints. To increase contrast and to stop the blade from just being perceived as a messy blur, we fill in the fuller with our darkest blue and then take our brightest white again for a full edge highlight. With this simultaneously being not as hard as I thought, and yet harder than I probably made it sound, the rescue of our Deathwing is finally complete. As exciting as this project was, I'm really glad to have it over with. Rescuing 55 miniatures is no joke, but But when I see the before and after footage of the miniatures given into my care, I'm really glad to see that we were able to breathe new life into these almost discarded Sons of the Lion. These guys also weren't the last of this army that you got to see. There've been a bunch of regular Terminators in an especially bad state of disrepair, so each one of those will get their own spotlight as well, if only in the frame of short-form content. And as you can see, I went wild with these guys just as much. If you're interested in the techniques that I used, I'll have a few guides with the exact paints listed down in the description of the video. And if I could get you hooked on the content of my channel in general, feel free to check out my other videos and maybe even hit that subscribe button. As I am really looking forward to seeing you again in my next video. Until then, take care and have fun painting.